Good morning, children. Today, we going to talk about separation of substances. Substances, what substances and what is the separation? Why do we need to separate the substances? See, we get so many things in nature for our use, but sometimes we get something which is mixed with useful thing, useless thing. You wanted to take away the useless thing from the useful thing, right? Okay. So, you have bought some rice for cooking. So, the rice is of not good quality. That means you are finding some stones in the rice. So, you bought one product, that is rice. It has two components. One is useful rice, second is useless stones. The stones in the rice are useless for you. So, you have to separate them. That is the necessity of separation, right? So, you are about to drink a glass of milk. For example, just assume that you are a little fat. So, the doctor advised you to not to drink milk which contain fat. So, you are about to drink a glass of milk with fat. Now, you wanted to separate the fat. That is the necessity of separation, right? Sometimes you do the separation in your plate itself. So, in the lunch time, you don't like certain vegetables in the khichdi that what you have, your mother has prepared for you. So, from the khichdi, you will be picking up the vegetables that you don't like. Upma, from the upma, you will be picking up the vegetables that you don't like. You will be picking up, sorting out the curry leaves out of the upma. Likewise, we separate the unwanted things from the wanted things. That is the necessity of separation. So, in this lesson, we are going to learn about the separation methods, different techniques. Why techniques? Simply we can do the separation. Just see, here we have a mango and guava. In a basket, if you have mango and guava, why methods are required? Simply you can identify what is mango, what is guava. You can hand pick, hand sort. You can sort them with your hand, take the mango out into one basket and go up. So, we don't need any methods. You feel that why do we need methods for this separation of substances? The second case, erasers and sharpeners. So, in the classroom, your teacher kept all the erasers and sharpeners in a bowl and you are asked to take the erasers out. You can easily separate them. By hand picking, you can pick all the erasers. There is no need of special separation method. So, why it is not needed? And one more example, pins and clips. Bell pins and jump clips are kept in one bowl. You can easily separate them, right? But it is not possible always separate the substances just by hand sorting. It is difficult sometimes. You cannot do it with your hand all the times. That you have to identify the point. What is the case? In which case we can't do with our hands? That is that salt and sand, handful of salt, handful of sand, both are mixed together and given to you. And you are asked to separate them. Can you do it by picking the sand grain, salt grain, sand grain, salt grain? How much time does it take? But is it possible? Do you think that it is possible? It's impossible. It's not possible to separate sand and salt by hand picking, right? And one more example I tell you, I have mixed a spoon of salt in water. I stirred it. The salt totally dissolved in the water. Now I have given you the glass of water and asked you to separate the salt. Can you do it in a very simple way how you have done in case of a mango and guava? Can you separate the salt from the water? No, because the salt is not at all visible to you. It is dissolved in the water. Do you think that we can separate salt from the water which is dissolved? Yes, we can. But we cannot do in this way by hand sorting. We need some method, separate method for the separation of salt from water. Here also we can separate the salt and sand, but we need one more method, one technique by which we can separate the salt and sand. It is possible to separate the constituents, but some method is required. Okay. So, there is a necessity of separation in our day-to-day life. We need so many things, but the things are not available in the purest form. We have to separate them from some other form. Okay? Example, you see every day, in our everyday life we can see the grains. Grains are to be separated from the plant. The farmers, they harvest the crop. That means they cut the crop, they cut the total plant. The plant is having the grains. The stem and grains are separated, right, in the fields. So in such way grains are to be separated. Butter. Butter has to be separated from milk by churning. By churning, the fat is separated from the milk. You know the process of churning. Okay. Cotton. We already studied in the fiber lesson. Cotton is found in the cotton fruit in the form of cotton wool, but the cotton wool is embedded with so many seeds. The seeds are to be separated by a process called as ginning. So there we need only cotton, we don't need the seeds. The seeds are to be separated by a method called as ginning. And the tea dust. So when we make the tea, we boil water and we add some tea leaves or tea dust, tea leaf dust, tea powder. In the common general terms, you call it as tea powder. The tea powder is kept in the water that is boiled. Then you have to strain it. Okay. That means when you drink the tea, you don't need the tea dust. So that is to be filtered. There you use a filter. Using the filter, you will separate the tea dust. Stones. Small stones are found in the food items. Food items are generally adulterated, mixed with certain stones to increase their weight to get profit. The people, they add little stones. Sometimes during the process of procuring them from the fields directly, certain stones may enter into the grains like rice or wheat or dals, pulses, they contain stones. So these stones are to be separated before you cook the meal, otherwise you suffer from eating stone, right? The stones are separated by sorting, hand picking, right? If your mother is preparing the food, she will put all the grains in a plate and she will search for the stones and pick them out. That is the necessity of the separation of substances, and some substances we can separate just by observing them. By hand picking you can separate, but in certain cases like this salt and sand, water and salt, you need to apply different methods. So let us explore the various methods of separation of substances. So now let us see the different methods of separation, right? The first one is that here we are going in an order that simple to complex. That means here we have a list of methods of separation. The order, it goes like the simplest method to the complex method. First one is hand picking. The next one threshing, winnowing, sieving, sedimentation, decantation, filtration, evaporation. Let us understand the importance of each method and the application of each method, how the method is useful, in which circumstances we can make use of these methods. The first one is hand picking. This is just like sorting out. How it is useful? It is useful in separation of fruits and vegetables. You go to a market, then to buy some vegetables, you go to the grocer. Do you buy what he gives you? You ask for 1 kg of bendi. So he gives 1 kg of bendi. Do you accept that? No. You will be choosing it with your hand, right? You will be sorting which is looking good, which is tender, which is green. You will be picking them. You are buying tomatoes. You are not simply taking the tomatoes into your basket. You are observing them and you are picking them. That means you are separating the best ones out of the heap into your basket. That is hand picking. Already I told you stones from the grains. You purchased a packet of rice you purchased a packet of dal and you will look for the grains in that, look for the stones in that, and you will be picking them out. Your mother will be doing this, picking the stones out to make the dish ready. They are to be separated. So that is called as hand picking, right? Hand picking. We will do that with hand. If the two components, the mixed components are of bigger size, they have enough size to hold with your hand, you use your hands to pick them out, sort them out, separate them out. If they are very small, you cannot do it with your hand. The next one is threshing. What is this threshing? Here, if you visit paddy fields, you can find the paddy plant. Once it is grown completely and dried, it is harvested. That means the plant is cut and kept in heaps. All the paddy plants or wheat plants are cut and put in heaps. Now, the stem is having the dried leaves, and along with the dried leaves, the spikes will be there. What is this spike? The spike is having the grains, all these grains. Now, how do we separate the grains here? Hand picking, we can use the technique. For example, if you go to a garden, fruit garden, right? So, you have gone to a fruit garden, grape garden. So, you are picking the grapes with your hand. Mango garden, you are picking the mangoes with your hand and putting them in the basket. In that way, you can harvest the crop. But in case of paddy, it is not like, you cannot pluck grain by grain. It is a very tedious job. Just you cut the total plant. Now, the plant is having the grains. How to separate the grains from the plant? Again, you cannot pick it with the hand. So, in these cases, we do the method called as threshing. What is this threshing? The farmers, they take a bunch of these plants, dried plants of wheat or paddy. They hit this bunch of plants against a stone. They hit it hardly. If this is a stone, they hit on the hard surface all these plants like this, in this direction. So, when they are beaten like that, all the grains will fall down, they are collected. This is called as threshing. This kind of method is applied in separating the grains from the wheat plant and rice plant. Sometimes threshing is also done by bullocks. They keep the very large heaps of this paddy or wheat plant, make the bullock or bullock cart to run over these, so whether the grains are separated. Sometimes they use tractors. Tractors fitted with special wheels, they are moved on these heaps of plants to separate the grain from the stem. That is also considered as threshing. So, the threshing is done by beating or hitting, or by vehicles, or by bullocks. Okay, right, that is threshing. Now, the next one, winnowing. What is this winnowing? Winnowing is a method of separating 2 or 3 substances that have different weight. So, you have a mixture of 2 or 3 components. In that mixture, some components are very light, some are heavy. Let us take an example for winnowing. Let us take an example here. So, sand plus sawdust, dry sawdust. You see that sawdust is light, sand is heavy. You are mixing some dried leaves also, dried leaves. Now, what happens? You see the 3 combination. Dried leaves are very much lighter than the sawdust. Sawdust is lighter than the sand. All these three are mixed. Now, how do you separate? You keep all the 3, sand, sawdust and dried leaves, in a plate. You go to an open place where there is proper wind outside, not in your room. You put it in a plate. Now slowly keep the plate higher to your shoulder level, this level, up, and tilt the plate. You are tilting the plate. Now the contents of the plate are slowly falling. They are falling. If this is the plate, they are falling like this. So when they are falling, because of the wind, you find that the heavier particles like sand will fall here and the lighter ones fall here because of the wind. They are blown to some other side. So by that you can find while falling down, they are falling separately because of the lightness and heaviness of their weights. In this way you can separate them. This is called as winnowing. Here in the example we discussed that the farmers, they separate the grains from the hay by threshing. After that the grains, they contain so many pieces of grass and all. The grains are not pure. The grains, they may contain so many bits of small broken grass, leaves of the plant and all. So when these grains are mixed with such light dust, light unwanted material, they keep the grains in the big plates, they hold it at the level of their shoulder and they will shake that. The grains, they fall down and all the light, dried, stack, whatever that leaves are there, so straw and leaves, these are blown away by the wind. This is called as winnowing. So next, let us see the sieving. Sieving is done by a device called as a sieve. Sieve you might have seen in your houses. Your mother will be sieving the floor to make roti. Whenever your mother is making some roti, she will take the wheat flour and to separate the husk, to separate the bran, she will just sieve the flour. So in the sieve at the bottom, she will get very fine powder. All the husk, stones and other unwanted materials are removed from the flour by sieving. So this is used in while sieving the wheat flour. Wheat flour. And one more example is that in building site construction, if you go to a construction site, there and the building construction is going on there, they need good sand. Good sand in the sense, the sand grains must be uniform. The sand, it may contain this much and this much amount of stones also, big sized stones, pebbles. So in the construction site you will find a big sieve where they will sieve the sand, they will remove the pebbles and bigger stones from the sand. So the sand will be having uniform particles, uniform sized particles, uniform sized sand grains. So they need the sieve. Sieving is done in construction. In construction. And even in the mills also, while they pack the grains, rice and wheat, they will separate the stones and husk by sieving. So sieving is a method of separating the substances on basing their size. Winnowing is separation on basing the heaviness or lightness. Sieving is the method of separating the substances by their size. We will put the contents in the sieve, the bigger ones will be remaining on the top, the smaller ones will be falling down through the holes of the sieve. Sieve is having holes, the smaller ones will fall down in the holes. So that is called as sieving. Now sedimentation. Sedimentation is a method of separating the substances depending upon their heaviness, okay, heaviness or lightness. But here we use a medium called as, here we are not using any device, we are using a medium called as water. So by this sedimentation we can remove the impurities that are dissolved in a liquid. Say for example, if we have a glass of water mixed with sand, some mud or sand, you mixed some mud or sand in a glass of water. Now the glass of water is having impurities. How do you remove the impurities? Here you can do sedimentation. If you allow the glass of water with sand for some time without disturbing it, you leave that for 1 or 2 hours, you will find all the mud or sand is sedimented down, coming down, and the top water is clear. Here we could separate, but how do we obtain this water? Okay, we can see the separation. We observe that the sand is at the bottom, water is at the top. How do you separate it? You can separate it by decantation. That means without disturbing the bottom contents of this glass, slowly bending the glass and pouring the top water into another glass is called as decantation. Okay, once the sedimentation is done, the top purified water is slowly taken to the other container, that is called as decantation. Decantation can be done. It is also a part of the separation of impurities. So you can combinedly talk about sedimentation, decantation and filtration, right? Sometimes if some impurities are dissolved in water, you can separate them by filtration. For example, 1 spoon of sand you mixed in a glass of water. A glass of water is mixed with a spoon of sand, water. You mixed the sand. Now you can use a filter paper or a sieve or a cloth, and you can pour the water with sand and separate the sand out. That is called a straining. In simple terms, straining of tea leaves in tea, how you have done, that is filtration. Here you can filter the sand, right? So filtration, we can separate tea leaves from the tea. We are filtering it out. We are filtering impurities from the water. You have a water filter at your home. Have you ever observed the water filter? If you open the top lid of the water filter, there you will find a mesh kind of thing which is filtering. Any bigger objects are there in the water, they will be filtered over there. So that is the technique of filtration. So finally we are going to talk about the evaporation. So here we have seen so many methods of separating. Then what is the necessity of evaporation? Evaporation is helpful in case of the substances that are mixed here are invisible. If the thing that is dissolved in water, it cannot be filtered or decanted, or sedimentation can't be done, in such a case evaporation is useful. Say for example, I have taken 1 glass of water and I have added 1 spoon of salt. So salt completely dissolves in the water. Now if I allow the water to stand for 1 hour, that means if I do the sedimentation, can I find the salt at the bottom? No. In salt water, no sedimentation takes place. So I cannot separate in such a way. If I filter the salt water using a filter paper, can I get the salt back? No. Salt cannot be filtered by the filter paper or by cloth. If I take a cloth, if I pour the salt water, all the water comes down to another container. I cannot separate the salt out. In such cases, we can take up the method evaporation. So what is this evaporation? Here a glass of water that is mixed with salt. Here I am putting the fire. So when I am boiling the water, all the water, it evaporates in the form of water vapor and the salt remains at the bottom. You can separate the salt. Okay. So this is the method called as evaporation, right? So the evaporation is a very, very important process that we observe in the nature, which helps the nature, which helps us, which helps the living things. How? The evaporation, it helps in the formation of water cycle. The water present on the surface of the earth in the form of lakes or rivers or oceans or seas, the water is evaporated due to the sun's heat, and the evaporated water is going and forming the clouds and forming the rains again, and once back it's coming down. So by this way the water cycle is set up, and the major process which is running the water cycle is that evaporation. In industries and factories, so many liquids are separated, extracted by the process of evaporation. So all these are the various processes that we use in our day-to-day life. Even at your home, your mother will be doing, you can watch it in the kitchen. At the same time, the same methods are used in industries also. You go to a mine where the metal ores are extracted, aluminum mine, gold mine, coal mine, copper, likewise different metal mines. If you go, they will be picking up big stones with so many impurities. From the stones, they will crush the stones into powder, they will wash them, they will follow the methods, hand picking and sedimentation, decantation. So likewise, so many methods they follow to finally extract the material that they want to obtain. Okay. So the methods of separation are very important, not only in our day-to-day life, not only in our house, not only in our kitchen. They are applied everywhere, in the industries, factories, everywhere these methods are applied to obtain the needed materials, to get the needed materials out of the source or raw material. So from a raw material, if you wanted to obtain whatever you want, only the particular part of it, you can apply all these methods.